King of glory, come. I surrender all. Hear my simple song. I love you, Lord. I love you, Lord. King of heaven, come. Let your presence fall. You're saving, you are strong. I love you, Lord. I love you, Lord. Jesus, all my heart belongs to you. Jesus, every heart belongs for you, lover of my soul.
A few years ago, I went on my first trip to Nepal. And the very first morning when we were going to trek, we just started heading up the mountain. And I'm not kidding you, I think we were on an angle like this for like 3 or 4 hours. We kept climbing this mountain. I never thought we'd reach the village that we were heading to, but finally, after a few hours, we got there. And we settled in, we were all tired, and we just had this wonderful meal with this community and had this great time of community with them. And then we heard our leader say something a few hours later. He said, "Hey, everyone, put your packs back on, get everything going, because we got a lot more trekking today." And I remember one of the teammates looked at me and he said, "Did he just say we're trekking more?" And I said, "Yes." I went out to our leader, Ramesh, and I said, "Ramesh, where are we going?" And he pointed off into the distance, and he had this tiny little blue dot across the mountain. He said, "We're going to that little blue dot. That's a house." And he said, "We have to come all the way around the mountain range. We have to go down into the valley, and we have to come up to make it to that house. And we have to get there before nightfall." And I thought to myself, there's no way. We're all tired. This is going to be long. We're never going to make it. But sure enough, step after step, this little team of people went around this mountain, down into the valley, and made our way up. Those last 2 hours, were excruciating, but we made it there just before nightfall and just before this horrendous rainfall. But we made it. I really think that this past year has felt like that we've had to go all the way across this mountain, down into this valley, and we're heading up. But here's the amazing thing to me. I really believe there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see it. We're even seeing how things are starting to reopen around the country and around our own city. This past week, I got to sit down with a friend of mine and actually have a meal at a restaurant. And we've been doing that regularly, and we had to stop for a while. And it was so energizing. We know that our students are going back to school little by little. So parents, you're celebrating. And by the way, great job, parents, at pivoting and changing, whether you're grandparents, whether you're foster parents, adopted parents, single parent, all of the parents out there, you've just done an incredible job. And here at Kensington, our Kensington Kids program is getting back into full swing as well. And we'd love to invite you to join our team of volunteers. We know that interaction and community for our children is so critical, but we also know how important it is for young couples to have a chance to breathe and to attend a service together. If you're passionate about children and you're attending live with us at one of our campuses, consider giving just an hour of your time and heart every few weeks to jump in and to serve, because spending an hour pouring into the next generation is one of the most important things we can do. So if you'd like to help, I'd just say please go to our app, our website, or ask anyone in the lobby at the hub what are the next steps that we can do in order to do that. So step in with us. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine, Father Ken Tanner, who's a great leader in this community, said something intriguing to me. He said that Jesus became the very thing that he loved the most. That Jesus, God, took on the form of humanity to enter into our human circumstances and be close to his creation. That's an extraordinary thought, actually. In some ways, it's probably like the ultimate episode of Undercover Boss. Okay, maybe that's stretching it just a little bit, but Jesus did walk in our humanity, and he had some of the most powerful and life-changing encounters with people. And this week, we are starting a brand new 7-week original series called Personified, where we'll be looking at some of the most intimate and intense encounters that Jesus had with people. And this will give us insight and deeper truths about God, about ourselves, and hopefully about the world around us. Our dream and hope for this series is that all of us will realize that Jesus is not detached. He's not an unapproachable king, but rather an empathetic and loving God. He desires to be part of all we are encountering in our lives, good or bad. We believe that church is much more than just 4 walls or just 1 hour per week. Church is God's people, and this past year really has shown us just that. It has forced us to think differently about what church could and potentially should be. And part of that is how our digital social spaces like our website, Instagram, Facebook, and other virtual platforms have led to greater connection and the ability to do church 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. An easy way to connect is by searching Kensington Church and join your local campus Facebook group. That's just a simple step that can keep all of us connected and knowing things about Kensington. And just so you know, behind the scenes, we are working so diligently to reimagine what Kensington will look like leading into the future, and how these incredible opportunities with our digital social spaces can help us bring the love and the hope and the peace and the presence of Jesus to more people close and far away. And I had this cool thing happen this past week, actually, that I went to my office and there was a letter that was on my desk. So I opened up the letter, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but this writing is awesome. It's a handwritten letter by a 12-year-old from Alpena named Izzy. And I'm just going to read a tiny bit of this. But it said, "Dear people of Kensington Church, my name is Izzy. I love watching Kensington Church," as they're up in Alpena. And then he says this, "The pastors and people at Kensington go out of their way to make everyone included. It is easier for us kids to understand than some churches." So I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I thought that was wonderful. And then it goes on to say, here are some of the series that I absolutely loved. And then towards the end, it said, "Thank you for talking about some of these issues that are happening in our culture." And at one point, they said, "It has opened my eyes to injustices around me, and I'm standing up for them in my community." That's a 12-year-old. And then it ends this way. It says, "Me and my sisters think Jalen C. Wright, and all the others should totally try out for The Voice." So there you go. So Jalen and Aaron and Davey and everyone out there that leads our great music program, you need to try out for The Voice, according to Izzy. You know, I was so encouraged and moved by Izzy's notes. And honestly, all the stories that we're hearing during this difficult time, where people are experiencing the love of Christ through our community. It is such a great honor and privilege to be on this faith journey with all of you. And know this, we are going to make it. We are close. You know, it's been a long year, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We are heading around the side of the mountain. We've been down into the valley, and we are heading up to our destination. And God is with us, and God is guiding us. And I've been looking at a passage in Scripture, 1 Peter 5, and it says this, "And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." I'm praying that our community, collectively and individually, feels restored, confirmed, strengthened, and established by God. I'm so grateful to be on this journey together with all of you, and I pray that you have a wonderful week.
Well, good morning. Good morning on this cold morning. Thank you for braving the cold. Should I shame the people online right now? No? Okay, that's not very Christian, is it? So we're glad wherever you are. Maybe you're up in Alpena watching. It's really cold up there, I'm sure, but we're so glad that you're with us today. You know, I love the hopefulness of where Danny ended there. One of my favorite prayers in the New Testament is found in the book of Romans, I think chapter 15, where the prayer is, "May the God of hope fill you with joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you will overflow with hope through the power of the Holy Spirit." So I'm just praying that we can enter a season of hopefulness now, that we can see that change is coming as we move through the rest of winter into the spring. So we're glad that you're here with us today. My name is Craig Mays. I'm the interim lead pastor at Kensington. It's my great honor to be a part of this community and to serve here. I do have a couple announcements I want to share with you today, so please pay attention. Even online, we need help. We need volunteers. In addition to K-Kids, which Danny already shared, we need some help with security. It's kind of dark in here, so I can't see, but I think I've got Rob over here. And is that Chris over there? Yeah, so wave, clap your hands. Thank these guys. These are my bodyguards. You know, when I'm not kidding. When I leave the auditorium, it kind of nerved me at first. I walk around to greet people in the lobby between services or after the second service, and these guys are kind of hovering, just in case you guys want to mess with me, right? Although you heard my story a couple weeks ago where I got mugged in New York twice and they didn't get anything. So I don't know if I need you guys or not. But anyhow, there is a training that we provide if you want to join the security team. And as we begin to fill up again, we're going to especially need that. So you can go to the hub after, you can go online to volunteer. And then the second thing is we need vocalists to join our vocal team. So if you sing, not in the shower, but if you sing for real, there's a process you go through to audition. So just give your name in the hub or go online. We would love to have you up here on the stage if God has given you those gifts and those abilities. So we're going to take a moment right now to receive our offering. So there's many ways to give, as you know. If this is your first time here with us, or if you're watching online for the first time, this moment is not for you. We want you to be our guest today and just see how God moves you through this service. But if this is your church, we appreciate so much. You can use your app. You can write a check and mail it in. You can go online, or you can drop it in the bucket on your way out. So we make it very easy for you to participate and worship God in this way. So thank you for that. Well, I have to tell you, honestly, I am very excited about the series that we're entering into this week. It's called Personified. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at Jesus during the last week before the cross and the resurrection. How he spent the last 7 days. And the idea of Personified is that we're really going to press into the humanity of Jesus. That he was actually a human being that experienced life in many ways like we experience it. And as we come into these different events, and it's going to take us all the way up to Good Friday and Easter, we're going to identify with Jesus in terms of what he experienced and what he suffered. There's a verse in Luke chapter 2 that I think we just kind of blow by this one early in the Gospel of Luke and not think too much about it. But it says, Luke writes that Jesus grew. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. To think for a moment about Jesus growing, that means that he had to learn to walk. He had to learn to add and subtract. He had to learn, as his earthly father was a carpenter and he went into his father's business, he had to learn carpentry. You know, over the years, I've been asked a lot of tough questions as a pastor from the Bible. This one caught me off guard. Someone asked me after a midweek service many years ago, do you think Jesus ever made a table where the legs were not even? And they thought that was a brilliant theological question, you know, like, isn't he perfect so he couldn't have? And I said, that's where we misunderstand his humanity. He grew. Of course he made tables that weren't perfect. And he got better with his craft, just like we all do when we learn a trade or a skill. So he was really fully God and fully man. That's the mystery of the gospel, that this one Jesus Christ was fully God and fully man. And this is so important because it tells us that he can empathize. And he does identify with our own, very own human experience. In fact, the writer of Hebrews put it this way in 2 different passages. Consider this. For this reason, he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, that he might make atonement for the sins of his people. And then just 2 chapters later, we find these words. For we do not have a high priest, he's speaking of Jesus here, who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, and yet without sin. So as I said, this is so important because it tells us that the God that we're talking about today, the God that we're worshiping today, this one Jesus, the mystery of God-man, has been in our shoes. He's walked this earth and experienced many things like we've experienced. And so between now and Easter, every week when we gather together, or when you join us online, we're going to press into different stories, different experiences of Jesus that last week. And I hope what we get out of this is this sense of solidarity with him, that as he's going through something, we know what he's experiencing because we have. And then as we go through life, experience things, we know that we do have one who understands. He empathizes. He gets us. And today we're going to begin with just an absolutely beautiful story about 6 days, 7 days before Jesus would go to the cross.
While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her."
Beauty. We long for it, measure it, worship it. It can bring us to tears, bring us to our knees, bring our wandering souls in close, or it can master us as we hunt it. Desperate to be it. Push, prod, pluck, plunder our futures for that moment, gaining that thing, that someone. That level of status or fame, or maybe just a frame of perfection. All perception and deception. But real beauty, unadulterated by trends, the kind that doesn't shift with winds, it is not earth-tethered, heavy-booted, practical and predictable. It's heavenly. Lifts us skyward, right into the blazing colors of the sunset, and we feel the thrill of artist near, the one whom all beauty is, found, made, sustained, bravely won. Beauty beheld is buoyant, our eyes drawn up, up, up higher than earthly spires, our souls follow, there is order, they say. But everywhere I see extravagance, magnificence, it is the whimsy of artists, the explosion of emotion, unrestrained passion for color, texture, form all variety of, and to whom it may concern. See the rolling and frothing of rhythmic waves. See the tiny curled fingers of a just-born babe. See the vastness and mystery of endless space. Beauty is grace. He's stretched out the plans and woven threads, tight, embossed and embellished and breathed into life. It cannot be contained, explained, earned, not man-made, blind men measuring with broken scales to a perfect 10, dealing out crushed hopes and luring them back again. There is abundance here. He is abundance. In the famished lands, feast your eyes. In the grey monotony and drudgery, hear the swelling of the song, the reverberation filling thoracic cavity, sending hearts pumping, plunging back to the ethereal from the ground down, lowliness of less than, beauty, skin deep, soul deep, etched in the lines. You thought it was time. The withered hands of his servant who gave an embrace to the hungry. The limping step of his servant who gave living water to the shattered hearts. Breathtaking. All taking artistic pains in the delicate butterfly wings of stained glass panes. And in the taking and giving, he is ever given. The taker of pain, the giver of beauty.
solitude seems, I will never be the same. No, I am lost and found in you, and I will bow my life at your feet, at your feet. My lips, so lost for words, will kiss your feet, kiss your feet. And I will bow my life at your feet, at your feet. My lips, so lost for words, will kiss your feet, kiss your feet.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little caught off guard by the beauty of that. I kind of don't want to preach a sermon now. I feel like that was a sermon. Just the beauty of God, the beauty of Jesus. And in this story, we're going to find a woman who really was so captivated by that beauty that she had to do something extravagant. I'm going to ask you to do two things with me today. One is to use your imagination, because we're going to tell a story, and I'm going to try to do the best I can to paint a word picture of what's going on here, but I'm just going to ask you to try to picture it, try to put yourself in this situation, in this amazing encounter that Jesus has just 7 days before the cross. So please use your imagination, try to picture what we're describing today. And then the second thing, and I think I mentioned this already once, maybe a few months ago, but a mentor of mine told me when we're reading the stories in the Gospels, we should try to find ourselves in the characters that are there. Like all of them. Like, who do we identify, or what part of this person is that like us? And I'm going to share from my own experience a little bit, but use your imagination and try to find yourself in the story that we're going to be looking at today. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of you're with a group of people, but right before you went to be with this group, something happened, something heavy. You know, maybe it was a personal experience you had, or maybe you received a phone call, it was some bad news, something heavy, something weighty that only you know about, and it's inside of you, but now you have to show up. And you have to be there, and whatever it's a dinner party or dinner meal or some event you're going to, and you're there, and you got all this going inside your mind, and there's all the chatter and conversation, but you're having trouble engaging with it. You ever been there before? I was thinking this week that almost exactly a year ago, maybe it was in early March, our son had moved out to California, and he'd been living out there, and we hadn't been able to visit him yet. And so we had planned a week's vacation. It was on the calendar for a long time. This is right before COVID began to explode. In fact, it exploded while we were out there. So we had planned this trip. We're going to go out there. We're going to rent a car. We're going to spend a week with him, see the house that he's living in, and he's going to give us all the insider view of Los Angeles and Hollywood and all of that. So we're really excited to go, get away from winter, get out on the West Coast. And so we got this trip planned, and then a week before the trip, was actually 5 days before the trip, I lost my job. And it was a shocking manner in which I lost my job. I didn't see it coming. I've never lost my job my whole life. I'm not a guy that loses his job. He leaves a job, but I don't lose my job. But I was fired. And I decided not to call my son and tell him. And we're going to go out there and just try to make it a good week. He was so excited for us to come, and I just didn't want to steal his joy. So we ended up, we got on the plane, we got out there, we rented a car, we had a convertible. And it was this beautiful sunny day, and there's the palm trees, and he was so excited at the airport. Big hugs, so glad, grab the luggage, throw it in the back of the car, put the top down, head away from LAX, and we're going to go to Venice Beach to this restaurant he likes, and we're going to sit outside and have lunch together. And I got this heaviness in my heart, and I don't want to tell him, but I don't know if I can not tell him. So we're sitting there, and the food is brought, and we're having this meal, and I can tell he can tell I'm not engaging like I normally would. There was some distance and whatever, and I was just trying my hardest, but I had this heaviness in my mind and my heart, and so finally I knew there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And so I just say, Josh, I have to share something with you. And then when it's really the first time I shared this story with any loved one, I couldn't even get through it. I got all choked up and I was crying about it, and it just totally changed the moment. And in the end, you need people around you when you're going through this. So my son was great, and we had a great week together. But I'll never forget that maybe 10 or 15 minutes when I had something heavy going on that I knew and he didn't know, and I was trying to be normal, and I just couldn't do it. Well, in a way, this is kind of where we find ourselves today with Jesus in this very first story that we're going to look at. He's at a dinner party. Think about this, just 7 days before he knows he's going to the cross. He knew what was coming. Pretty much no one else in the room knew what was happening. I think there was one person, and that's the key to our story today. But can you imagine, now remember, fully God, fully man. We tend to think of Jesus as the Son of God, that part of him, but imagine in his humanity coming into a dinner party with his closest friends and his disciples and sharing a meal and all the things that happen at dinner parties, laughter and jokes and fun and all that, but he's got this in his heart and in his mind. So we're going to look at the story from two different perspectives. We're going to kind of combine them because John and Mark each recorded this event for us, but each had different elements, so we're going to jump kind of back and forth between the two. So here's where the story begins. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table. And then Mary, and then I want to just pause there for a moment, because I want us to picture the scene. We're going to kind of peek in the window, if you can use your imagination, to see what's going on around this table that they're reclining at. Now, Mark tells us in his account that the owner of the house was named Simon, and he actually calls him Simon the leper. How would you like to have that as your name? Simon the leper, it's his home, and Mary and Martha and Lazarus are there in the home. So just a little bit about each of these players so we understand what's going on in the room. So Mary and Martha are two sisters. Their brother is Lazarus, and there's a famous story told by Luke in Luke chapter 10 where Jesus came to their house and he was teaching. You guys know this story? If not, it's a pretty cool story because he's teaching, and Mary, the one sister, is at his feet listening. And by the way, this is the same Mary that we're going to look at today in our story. But this is some time ago, so there's a dinner party as well, and she's at his feet, and Martha, we're told, is in the kitchen busy getting the food ready. And so at one point, Martha comes out, imagine this now, interrupts Jesus' teaching and says, hey, I'm doing all this work. Mary should be helping me out, my sister. Could you tell her to help me? And Jesus actually says, and I'm more of a Martha than a Mary. When I read that story, that's like totally me. Always working, always worried about things. He says, you are worried and bothered about so many things, Martha. He actually says, Martha, Martha. He says it twice. I think just endearing. Martha, Martha. You're worried and bothered about so many things. But Mary has chosen the better. She's made the better choice. So don't take that away from her. So this is the Mary and Martha who are in this story now. And what did it say that Martha was doing, by the way? Did you catch it? She was serving. See, she just can't help herself. She's a server. And you know what? If you're a server, I love you. In fact, they're going to be mad at me for calling them out. But Joe and Cappy Graney are the couple that I stay with when I'm in Michigan. And Cappy worked for me when I was on staff at Kinston years ago. And they are amazing, but they're Marthas. And I hope you're Marys as well. But they are serving me so, like, it's ridiculous. The food I'm eating, dry cleaning my clothes, just everything they're doing to provide for me. And I go home and tell my wife, Chris, about it. She says, you're never going to want to come back. And I'm beginning to feel that way a little bit. So we love all you Marthas out there. And you serve, and it's such an expression of your love for God. And I just absolutely love it. But Mary, so Martha's serving, and Mary now, coming back to the present now, this present story, Martha's serving, but Mary again is sitting there, apparently not serving, listening to the conversation around the table. Now, the other character here is Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha. Anybody recall what happened to Lazarus? Raised from the dead. Let's just take a look at that story again. This is the end. So Mary and Martha had called to Jesus because their brother Lazarus was sick to the point of dying. So they were worried. So they called to Jesus and said, come to Bethany, please, our brother is dying. And when Jesus got there, he had already passed away. He was dead, and he was already in the tomb. And so there's a lot that goes on here, but just to the conclusion, in John 11, Jesus then, standing before Lazarus' tomb, called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. I mean, come on, you got to picture that scene. Like a mummy walking out bound, and Jesus says, take off his grave clothes, give him something to eat. And so these three are at this last dinner here. 7 days before the cross, they're having a dinner party in Jesus' honor. It's no wonder it's in his honor, right? The sisters who got their brother back from the dead. Imagine him at your dinner table. You're not going to talk about the prospects for the Tigers this year, or you're not going to be talking about the cold weather that we're having right now. You're going to be leaning into this story. I'm sure they're talking about this event still. All this time later, it's such an amazing thing. And then the other person at the table is Simon the leper. We don't know anything about Simon except that he was called the leper, and I think it's implied that he used to have leprosy and he doesn't now. I believe this has to be one of the many lepers that Jesus healed, and we're given one account where 10 lepers were healed at one time, and they all went away, and then one turned back, came back to Jesus to thank him. So this is not necessarily the right interpretation of this, but I like to believe that this man who came back to Jesus to express his thanks decided to stay around and became a friend of Jesus. And so perhaps it's his home where he is now sitting, reclining at his table in this dinner that is done in his honor. So let's just review. In the room, we have someone raised from the dead. We have a man with leprosy who was healed. We have Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus. And then we have the disciples there as well. And we probably have some other guests inside this home. So they assembled in his honor. So let's go back to the story now. So Mary, therefore, took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with fragrance of the perfume. It was filled with fragrance. This is a very, by the way, expensive perfume. Very expensive. I don't buy perfume myself. I probably bought it for my wife once, and I think I bought the wrong kind, so I don't do that. But I'm shocked at how expensive perfume is. Even men's cologne, certain kinds can be very expensive, but this one blows these out of the water, I think, in most cases. If I'm wrong, some of you can come up after and say, no, you can spend that much money on perfume still today. But they spent, this thing that Mary did now was very, very expensive. And so how did the room react? Well, here's how they reacted. One of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him just 6 days from now, he objected and he said, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. Is there perfume that costs that much, a year's wages? 300 denarii in their time, but that was almost a year's wages. Judas did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. So Judas objects and says it's wasteful. If we look at the Mark version of this, he says all of them objected. And they even scolded Mary. They scolded her for doing this. What an absolute waste. Are you stupid? What are you thinking? That's a lot of money. What are you doing? Now, remember, Jesus knows what's coming. The rest in the room apparently were clueless. But let's identify with Mary for a moment. This would have been a very, very tough spot to be in. Do you know that women in this time weren't usually even at the table? They would be doing what Martha was doing. They would be serving the men. I'm sorry, but that was the way it was back then. There wasn't really equal rights. And so Mary was really out of place even being there. And then without talking to anybody, discussing it, she came prepared. She brings this expensive perfume and breaks the alabaster jar, which meant it's all going to be used because you break the jar, there's no way to refill it. And she takes a year's wages worth of perfume and anoints Jesus with it. And then with her own hair is wiping his feet. It's an amazing scene, but the people in the room are not very happy about this. She scolded. It didn't make sense to anybody except for Jesus. Again, putting myself in the story, I think I would have objected to that. That just seems ridiculous to do that. Like, what in the world, Mary, are you doing? And so it would have been a humiliating moment, an awkward moment. In fact, I think there was silence in the room, like people are dumbstruck. Like, why would you do this? But then here's what Mark says. Here's what happens after. Jesus now speaks. He says, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing for me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want. But you will not always have me." She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Now, if you want to ruin a dinner party conversation, talk about death. Talk about burial. That was like a bomb that he threw into this intimate setting around this table. He says, "Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." So Jesus, in response to this extravagant waste, honors her, praises her, calls what she did beautiful, and declares that this is in preparation for his burial. And I think at this point, the rest of the guests are scratching their heads. Like, what did he just say? Burial? What is he talking about? Burial. What did he mean when he said, "You're not always going to have me with you"? And so they have to be puzzled and concerned. But the truth is, Jesus had been telling those closest to him for some time that this was coming. In fact, I want to give you just one example, but it's repeated many times in the Gospels. This is from Mark chapter 9. Jesus was teaching his disciples, and he was saying to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And after 3 days he will rise." And then catch this. But they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him. I don't know, that just kind of strikes me as funny a little bit. Like, I try to imagine he was saying to them, which means as he got closer to the cross, he began to pull them aside and say, "Listen, I need to tell you how this is going to go. Someone's going to betray me, and I'm going to be put to death, but I'm going to rise again." And then it says they didn't understand, and then the second statement, they were afraid to ask. Why would they be afraid to ask Jesus this? And I think at some level, they didn't want to know. They had no place in their mind where they could register this one that had been healing people and raising Lazarus from the dead. What are you saying? You're going to die? And so even though he had warned them and informed them of this, they came to this dinner party now totally unaware. And now it's only a week away. He knows what's coming. He's sitting there eating. And I just want us to see if we can identify with the humanity of Jesus for a moment. I mean, much weightier than the story I told at the beginning where I'd lost my job. But Jesus is among his friends. As a human being, he knows he's going to suffer. He knows the weight of what's coming to bear the sins of the world. He knows he's going to be falsely accused. He knows he's going to be mocked and spit on. All the indignity, he knows this is coming. And he's at a dinner party in his honor. And they didn't know what was coming, even though he had told them. But now, here's Mary. Here's Mary. She came prepared. And without a word, this woman who had been sitting at the feet of Jesus, I think all along, listening, leaning in, learning, she knows. Somehow she knows. And so she gets up and pours this perfume. Imagine Jesus in that moment where no one gets it except this one woman right here, and she's poured the perfume on his feet, and she's taken her own hair to clean it. That act of worship and love and empathy. What did that mean to Jesus? Well, we know what it meant to Jesus because he very carefully chose his words, I think, when he said, "She has done a beautiful thing for me." He saw the beauty in that. And I like to believe that he felt what he needed was this human connection. Someone in the room got it and understood. Jesus found beauty in her devotion to him, giving her all. There's the words of that song, "Jesus, I give you my all. I surrender everything to you." I think it meant a lot to him. I think he affirmed and celebrated what she had done and called it beautiful. And then I love the fact that he said, this is the reason why I love the fact, at the very end he said, "And what she's done will be told, wherever the gospel is told, it'll be remembered." So guess what? Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2021, in Clinton Township, we're telling the story. This act of sacrifice, this act of beauty, this solidarity that she had with Jesus, her story is being told and celebrated today. Now, when you see a story, so again, try to picture this, use your imagination. In this room, this has just occurred. This woman has made a huge sacrifice out of worship for Jesus, knowing what he was facing and what that may have meant to Jesus. So the question is now, what does it mean to us? Like, this is kind of the so what? So what? That was 2,000 years ago. How does this pertain to my life? And there's two things that as I reflected on this story, that were really meaningful for me this week. The first is this, that Jesus was impacted by Mary. He was affected by her behavior. You know, I grew up with this idea of God, or this picture of God, that probably the only way I ever affected God was that he would be angry when I messed up. You know, when we're taught to believe that God doesn't really change. The theologians use a word like immutable, and we really don't affect God, except in my mind, as a young boy growing up in church, was that be careful, because if you act up, God's going to be mad at you. And then we have all these stories in the Old Testament of God just punishing people. So I could affect God that way. But it never really occurred to me that I could bring other emotions to God, like pleasure. Do you understand that how we choose to live, the choices that we make, the things that we do, can bring joy to God, can bring pleasure to God? Just like Mary, when he observed and witnessed and experienced what she was doing, that in that moment of connection and seeing her devotion to him, that he felt pleasure in that, and he would describe her act as beautiful. Could you imagine this week if we became more mindful of this, that what we do can put a smile on God's face? You know, the other thing that we were told is at the end of life, we want God to say, "Well done." But that's when you're dead. What about while you're living? While we're alive? This story tells us that what we do affects God. It moves God. God experiences something based on how we live. One of the ways the New Testament puts it frequently is the expression to please God. To please God in all respects. That we bring, the same word, please, we can bring pleasure to God. And I just found that extraordinary this week to think about it. I became more conscious of what I was doing. And the realization that God is affected by what I do, and that I can actually bring him joy. He can see my devotion or my sacrifice or my love or my empathy for others or my patience and all of that, and it brings pleasure to God. Because this is a work that he's doing in me, and I become more and more like him. This story tells us that what we do matters to God. Every act that we do matters to God, that we can please God. But the second thing that I think this account tells us, and is really the whole point of this series that we're calling Personified, is that when we find ourselves in all of life's situations, that he can identify with it. He's been there. You know, I actually thought of this week. I tried it out on my wife, and she didn't like it. I said, you know the expression, been there, done that? Right? We say that? Oh, I've been there, done that. Well, Jesus been there, didn't do that, but he's been there, right? Because it says, in all points, he was tempted like us. So he's been through every trial, every temptation. He's experienced it as a human being, and yet without sin. So he's been there. He didn't do all that, but he's been there. So when we're there, he knows. So going back to Venice Beach, when I was sitting there at that table, I didn't think of this story, but I'm thinking about it now. When I was there with the heaviness of what I had lost and the uncertainty of my future and all the anxiety and fear and kind of the shame I felt at being let go from a job, all of that was there, that Jesus knew exactly what that felt like as a human being, because he was facing that, and he would face the rejection and the wrong that was done to him. He would be there. And so this story invites us in our trials and our challenges and the problems that we have and the things we experience and the pain and the suffering, the difficulty, to lean into one who knows, not intellectually, but he knows through experience. I mean, you've probably shared, like I have, experiences with people, and they look you in the eyes and they say, yeah, I understand, and you know they don't. Actually, usually when we say, I understand, and we say that because we really don't, but we want to try to understand, usually when we understand, we respond in ways that make that connection there. And so we need community that we can pour out to with each other, but to know that the God who redeemed us, the God who loves us, the God who came, fully God and fully man, understands deeply. And I don't know what you're facing right now, today. I don't know what you're facing this week. I don't know what uncertainty you're grappling with, whether it's related to the pandemic or your work, your health, all of that. We have one who walked this earth, who got hungry and tired and thirsty, had to deal with human beings who misunderstood him, rejected him, treated him badly, separated from him, one who would, as we'll see later in this series, would betray him as one of his closest disciples, betrayed him. We have a God who is able to sympathize with us, and even in our weaknesses. I love that the writer of Hebrews says that. In our weaknesses, he doesn't judge. He says, I understand. I get it. I've been there. This beautiful story, this intimate moment between Mary and Jesus tells us so much. It tells us that how we choose to respond to him can bring him pleasure. He can see beauty, the beauty of an inner person. In fact, there's a scripture that tells us that the adorning should not be the outward appearance, and you all look so marvelous today, but it's the inner beauty. 1 Peter 3:4 says, let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. See, God's affected. He finds it beautiful. He finds it precious. We bring that to him in our life of surrender. And then as we bring our difficulties and our pains, our trials, our tribulations, we have one who has been there, and he does understand. There's an old hymn that puts it this way. Maybe some of you, I met some friends before the service that are like me, more advanced in years, and maybe you remember these words, some of you. But even if they're new, let the reality of this just wash over you. No one understands like Jesus. He's a friend beyond compare. Meet him at the throne of mercy. He is waiting for you there. No one understands like Jesus. Every woe he sees and feels. Tenderly he whispers comfort. In the broken heart he heals. No one understands like Jesus. When the foes of life assail, you should never be discouraged. Jesus cares and will not fail. Jesus, help us in these moments to know you in that way today. To know you as one who walks with us. Know you as one who has walked the path that we walk. To know you as the one who has experienced all that life has to offer, both the beauty and the ugliness, and that you offer yourself to us as our friend, as our companion, as the one who can bring comfort. May we, in these closing moments, know that deeply in our hearts. We pray this in your name. Amen.
You go before
you've even gone to win my war. You come back with the head of my enemy. You come back and you call it my victory. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. Your love becomes my greatest defense. It brings me through the dry wilderness, and all I did was praise. All I did was worship. All I did was bow down. All I did was stay still. Hallelujah, you have saved me. So much better your way. Hallelujah, great defender. So much better your way. You know before I do, when my heart can seek to find your truth. Your mercy is the shade I'm living in, and you restore my faith and hope again. All I did was praise. All I did was worship. All I did was bow down. All I did was stay still.
You have saved me. So much better your way. Hallelujah, great defender. So much better your way. Hallelujah, you have saved me. So much better your way. And hallelujah, great defender. So much better your way.
And when I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love. You picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart.
And when I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love.
Well, every week it's our prayer that in some way God spoke to your heart, to our hearts today. I hope that we can leave this place knowing that we are loved, that we are understood, that we are cared for. To live loved this week. That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Just to live loved by God. Well, before we go, we got a snowy week coming, right? If you looked at the weather forecast, we do have a midweek service this week, and I'm really excited about it because we're going to do a 4-part series once a month, and it's called Lessons on the Lake. And these are stories from Jesus' life that occurred on the Sea of Galilee, because some pretty crazy things happened out in a boat or on the shore that I think are amazing stories and very instructive for our lives. And I figured since we're so close to Lake St. Clair, this side of town, we should spend some time during this cold winter months out on the water. So this Wednesday, we're going to kick it off with our first story on the lake. It's at 7 o'clock, and if you're watching online, we will be live streaming also at 7 o'clock. It's supposed to snow tomorrow and Tuesday and Thursday, but God gave us a day off, so we hope that many of you will come back, and we're going to have great music and great artists that are sharing their gifts with us so that we can spend extended time in worshiping and praising God. So we hope that you'll join us this Wednesday. Be safe, and I'm going to give you my address. You can come over and shovel the driveway, okay? Because I forgot how to shovel in New York City. So have a great, safe week. Be safe. God bless.